Sylvia, for giving me the floor. And good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining this EUPrevent conference and sharing with us your experience and knowledge. I think we all agree that we need this kind of opportunity to debate and to discuss, and of course to capitalize our work. In order, of course, to build this peaceful and safe society. So I want just to put on some consolidated lessons and some recommendations. I try to not be very long. So we have a few learned lessons, and the first one is about the importance of the gender mainstreaming. And for that, we consider two postulates. The first one is that gender mainstreaming is no longer an option, it's a necessity. The point is that women are often invisible in our projects, in our studies. And we speak about women sometimes as group, as specific group, and which we devote a chapter or paragraph. Even we know that radicalization is different when it comes to men and between men and women. For example, we have men and women haven't the same reasons to get in radicalization and don't follow the same processes, and yet, and however, we continue to consider that we can use the same educational tools with the same curricula, the same results for men and women. Of course, we know that there are a lot of gender studies for women, but how many subjects, and especially what kind of subjects we have in this study? And for example, in PVE, for instance, how many projects are there with gender mainstreaming? And in contrary, how many projects exist without having this overview of women and mentioning the situation of women? This problem of not speaking about specifically of women and speaking about just men, it's we unconsciously take in account men as references, and it's very interesting. Anne-Marie Devro speak about anthropocentrism in the science, which is when we present the results from a male point of view. In fact, and we don't know it, we always take adult men as a reference in our study. So we know we need to be very careful and perhaps to introduce the reference of women in our study. The second postulate in the gender mainstreaming is to consider that as women represent the half of the population, they could and would be the half of the solution. In fact, of course, we invite women and as mothers, sisters, and wives to work in PVE, and we invite them, of course, in the first and earlier radicalization, because they are considered that they are positioned to spot the first warning signs of radicalization, and in another hand, they are as well invited in the processes of de-radicalization. When we have this approach and emotional approach to work with the radicalized person when they are completely dehumanized. But somehow this way to work with women is generate and continue to generate stereotypes, because we link women to relatives, we link women to this sensitivity and affect dimension. And my question is, how about the others women? How about the researchers the practitioners, the policymakers? How about the professional women? And can we pay attention of their female perspective? Can we work with the practitioners, for example, with their women point of view, their women experience, and their women expertise? So I think we can enrich the PVE and CVE if we introduce this perspective of professional women. The second lesson learned is about the impact of religious-based policies in sometimes in the push factors of radicalization. The problem of when we use the religious-based policies, that we categorize these vulnerable groups with Muslims, migrants, and Muslims, migrants, youth suburbs, and Muslims youth suburbs. So this categorization of vulnerable groups somehow generate this dichotomy within the us and them, and them we will make this them visible, and this visibility and when we make them visible, we make them visible as linked to radicalization and linked to then linked to terrorism. This categorization is a problem because despite everything, they become, because they are visible and linked to radicalization, they became a threat. In a way, this stigmatization generates a hostile environment, which is a breeding ground for polarization and therefore for radicalization. Of course, we have the media, which sometimes distort information and emphasize the threat of these groups. And finally, they impact the society and they generate hate between both sides of the us and the them. And we have observed that with the protest march against the migrants and the migration, and the campaign against Muslims. So we need to be very careful when we work with this the religion dimension, because despite of the importance to have vulnerable groups, we need to reconsider these methods. The third lesson is about the confidentiality. The confidentiality aspect could be an obstacle in the PVE and CVE, and especially when we work with radicalized people. We know that for confidentiality, we have two situations. The first situation is the work with radicalized people. And in this case, professionals often face the dilemma between building trust with the detainees and radicalized detainees in the exit programs, for example, and radicalized people by keeping their secrets about their networks, their acquaintances, and of course about their ideas. And on the other hand, the responsibility to give information to the police of in the name of the national security. So professionals need guidance, tools to handle these contradictions. The second situation is in cooperation. We know that sometimes we can't work with all the actors involved in the PVE and CVE, especially if we take when we have sensitive information. And we know that when it comes to radicalization, every information is sensitive. So we need to have a place and to have space where all the conditions of trust are met. And it's why we know that confidentiality underlies cooperation. I think if we handle this problem of confidentiality, we can improve our collaboration. The fourth lesson is about the balance to find between the security issues and the work with radicalized people. And we know about this problem that even we have some tools and some methods from the Europe and the European level. We can't sometimes use them in the local level because the security issue is specific to each country. And for example, in our case, in Way Out, we can't work in prison with some population as workers, as social workers or as mentors. We need EU, for example, advise us to work with mentors who are who are sometimes former terrorists because they can understand I think the background of the radicalized people. But in some states, even in France, we can't work with this population. And it's the same when the prisoners are outside. We can't do very well our job because they are strongly and controlled because the security, so they can attend all the programs and all the activities. So somehow we need to find this balance between the security issue and our intervention in PVE and CVE. And of course, we need also to work more I think in coordination with the common framework, European framework. Even we know that the security dimension is specific to each state. So in this case, we need to have real work between the European level and the local level. And finally, I just want to propose some themes for the future EU research. The first one is the confidentiality. We know to have studies about that and to understand more what is the confidentiality, how we can work in the situation with the confidentiality and so on. The second theme is about a legal framework. To conceive a legal framework to strengthen interagency collaboration and to strengthen this exchange between the different actors engaged in this the PVE and CVE. The third theme is about elaborating toolkit. This toolkit could collect all the results, the good practices and the results of projects. It could be also a way to capitalize our work and to sustain it. We need the sustainability of our results, and having toolkit is a way to use it again and again. And finally, I want to speak about the double approach from the two references, female and male. It's very important for us to see what is the situation of the half of the population. And of course, it's important to exchange, it's important to be complementary because they see 6 and I see 9. So it's very important to know exactly what the two population, male and female, are saying. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Shafia. Thank you for your insights and your recommendations of the Way Out project. It was very interesting. Thank you so much. Also raising issues about gender mainstreaming, representation of women, of course, confidentiality. You know what I mean? And security issues. So thank you so much for that. I would now like to welcome our next colleague, Javier Rui Perez. I'm trying to speak Spanish, but I think it's not so good. The Director of Research and Projects at the Euro-Arab Foundation, Fundea, and he will present the Amor project today. So, Javier, are you there? Yeah, I can see you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thanks,
Good
Sylvia.
morning.
And
Thank
thanks, everyone of you, our colleagues organizing this very interesting conference, but also all the people who is attending the seminar. I'm trying to share my screen. Wait for a second. There's the PowerPoint. Sorry. Here it is. Can you see this now?
It's still loading. I can see it now. It's working.
Okay. I'm trying to come full screen. Sorry for this, the computer is low. Okay. Wait a second. So, well, I'm going to try to, in 10 minutes, like very quickly come to the most relevant issues from or the aspects in the way of lessons learned from our ARMOR project. We work especially focusing on preventing polarization and youth radicalization through fostering resilience among youth by the means of first-line practitioners working with youth. So this is not our learnings in the project, but the translation of the most important aspects that well, more than 100 experts and practitioners that participated in the research phase, plus later on 500, more than 500 practitioners that have participated in the experimental labs architecture we have created, plus the implementation of these experimental labs, plus the training phase and the development of tools, have been telling us on the topic and on the different tools we have created. The first one is very basic, but I need to mention this so we can have in mind this for the rest of recommendations of lessons we learn, and it's the need of contextualization, that the need of taking into account that every context is completely different. So from the very beginning of our project, we realize through the research phase and later on in the rest of the phases that there are many differences between the different countries. The context and the deployment of tools of knowledge is completely different. There are also differences among the different kind of practitioners. Is not the same from police forces, but for educators, social workers. So there are different needs, but also different problematics for them. They come with different backgrounds and they need different approaches. So the typical topic of no one size fits all applies also to develop prevention programs. And this is very important to have always in mind. So later on is the important when approaching the work or the intervention with young people is to keep a balance between the preventing radicalization, violent extremism approach and the fostering resilience approach. Those are two different approaches to the same problematic that can work complementary, but are different. So prevention is necessary, but sometimes has shown to be ineffective when we directly work on preventing radicalization due to the shape of securitization. But another approach is to working, trying to foster resilience among young people. This is also necessary, but for youngsters, especially for young people, is much more appealing. So this is an opportunity to work with them with this shape of securitization, like directly addressing, giving them the skills and the capabilities to foster their resilience to radicalization processes, to polarization and to violent extremist narratives. So we can try to make them more protected against possible recruitment and engagement processes. And when we talk about resilience, we have to, or we need to consider the different dimensions of resilience, because lately we talk too much about community resilience and social resilience, but this should start by individual resilience, which is quite important, and also consider the more upper aspect of governments and authorities fostering resilience dimension. The third point is the really fundamental basic of consider practitioners' needs at the very beginning. Not only because what I mentioned at the very first, that each one is different, but we saw also from the very beginning that there is beyond the huge efforts developed in the last 10 years, there is still a quite huge lack of awareness about the topic among practitioners. So they express many times that they need to know more about what radicalization is and how it happens. Because many of them are sensitive, really sensitive about this topic, but work in an intuitive manner from their experience, their knowledge, they act, but they have not received any specific knowledge on it, and they are demanding it. And they constantly ask to have materials, to have tools, to have resources, but also to they have the need to different mechanisms for communicate among themselves and to collaborate between practitioners and also with authorities and law enforcement agencies. And also this is important when we have discussed with them about fostering resilience among young people, they have many times expressed that they need to be resilient themselves. So they we have developed, like, let's say, a mixture of a methodology to work fostering resilience, but becoming resilient as well as someone working with young people. So they need to, in this sense, improve their skills and capabilities as first-line practitioners working with young. Fourth important point is counting on young directly. So if we want to work with young, it's just the same, more or less. Shafia mentioned for gender, applies a bit for young. We consider them like a receiver or a target, but we need to involve directly them in the process, but putting them in the middle. Because they are a specific phase in their lives, they are developing their personality, but they are in a very sensitive moment of their lives to receive specific narratives. They are developing their personality. So any preventive and especially primary prevention and secondary prevention initiative need to listen and involve youngsters, giving them voice and bringing them, engage them in the initiative, and this should count on something that only them can bring. That is what is motivating for them, what is appealing for them, and what are the methodologies that make them initiatives more attractive. A 5th point is as well, of course, in relation with the needs I mentioned before, is engage also the practitioners working with them. They have the field knowledge and the experience of working with YAO. They have the needs I expressed before, but they also know the context, the YAO and the needs. And they know these methodologies that they can apply and what are the approaches that are successful for this job. A sixth point is that education is a priority to work in prevention. Many times we have heard from the people we have been working is the importance of those skills and capabilities that make us more protected, more resilient against radicalization processes should be somehow included in the curricula, the education curricula. This make also the process extensive to other parts. I mean, if we are able to work those skills, those capabilities, those protective factors in the education area, this makes extensive also to the community, to the families, and to the social area. And it serves also to address other problematics more related with intolerance, with discrimination, with hate speech, with bullying, with gender violence, where many other forms of attitudes and behaviors that are somehow in the starter points of the process that can be worked also if we address just resilient protective factors and so on. And additionally, could be important to explore methodologies that can serve to develop resilience through the existing curricula, not introduce new parts in the curriculum, additional parts, additional curricula, but also explore how we can foster resilience through when they are learning the normal parts of the curriculum from history, science, social science, or whatever. 7th point is the importance of developing monitoring, evaluation, and impact assessment mechanisms for the preventive initiatives and interventions to know what works and what does not work. This requires dedicated resources to develop those mechanisms, but consider that this is a long time process. So many times with a 2 years project, this is impossible because to develop a tool or a mechanism for evaluating, for monitoring, for developing impact assessment requires a long process to see if this is working or not. And this is in line with what things that Safia mentioned already, needs to be, with of course, respect human rights, but also GDPR, local pillars, and consider ethical aspects. And is also essential for multi-stakeholder cooperation. Another point is that all of these could be easily developed by developing national networks. This is quite important, and it has been mentioned that there is a huge amount of European efforts, but the development of national networks could serve to start to come down to the national, but later regional, local, to the community and the individual dimensions. And this could result in of course, strengthening really prevention radicalization. And in line with this, Shafia already mentioned in the ideas for future, the deploy what already exists. It means there are huge amount of really interesting developments that need to be sustained in the time, knowing what is working, explore this and systematize it, selecting the best practices that can be useful in each context and translate it in every sense, not only translating in language, which is required, but also translating into the context by adapting and contextualizing, and make those available for first-line practitioners who should, of course, be trained on this. And this could serve to maximize the efficiency of the resources that we are dedicating to this. 9th point is the need to develop somehow digital youth work or digital social work. This digital work is nowadays a natural environment for youth. This is, of course, not really well controlled or not really well supervised. But in the last years, and especially also with this pandemic in the last year, where we have seen how this has served to increase the time of exposure of youngsters to the digital environment, let's say, which is a source of quite dangerous narratives, which additionally are not confronted with nobody else. So the need to develop specific tools to work in the digital world is very important, without forgetting, this is an additional thing, that narratives can be others also, not only by counter narratives, but also by developing specific skills. One of the topics we have developing our Armor project is the narratives therapy laboratory, in which those skills can be worked with young people. And that's all for my side. Thank you very much. There are other points that we can, of course, discuss later on.
Thank you, Javier. Thank you so much for this comprehensive approach on fostering resilience, especially among young people, but also keeping in mind the needs of practitioners. So thank you very much for all of these insights from your project. I would now like to introduce Dana Dolkin to you as a representative of Patria and the project the Champions Project, other way around. Welcome, Dana.
Thank you, and I hope you can see my screen. So I'm here to talk a bit and only briefly about the lessons learned in the Champion project. Many of you are also our partners. The objectives of Champions were quite straightforward: to establish offline permanent practitioners in-person groups as a stable and local international coalition of professionals relevant for the field in Germany, Poland, Romania, and Hungary, to establish and operationalize a process and practice of multi-agency cooperation, and create an online platform for coordination, training, and recommendations. Our emphasis has always been also localization and intervention. And you've probably heard about the Alert Arena, this being the platform that I just mentioned, in the last 2-3 days. A couple of lessons that we've outlined. Obviously, there are many more that we can discuss. Obviously, the focus on detection, intervention, de-radicalization, in addition to the prevention, and this should be embedded in a intercultural understanding. The need to build trust and mutual understanding between professionals and also with our FLPs, to bring in different occupational perspectives, workout overlaps, and create a common language and viewpoints that in a way foster a type of constructive conflict culture. It would also be interesting, we agreed along the project that individual family backgrounds, for instance, of the target groups that we've worked with should be considered as an important factor on how they influence radical ideologies. As the other projects also mentioned, education is vitally important, and specifically how education is done. That is to foster a type of inclusive education that allows and gives more tropes and participation to broader groups. Psychological factors of radicalization are also important. And here in Champions, locally, we focused on ideas of mental health and well-being. Also mentioned before has been gender and how important gender and sexism, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, should be and is in a growing phenomenon of radicalization. Obviously, that also meaning public discourses about gender roles and domestic violence, so on and so forth. I think these all lead already to a picture of normalization of intolerance and how that normalization should be taken into account in all approaches on de-radicalization and prevention. And I think a lesson that has also been very specific for us has been that radicalization is always politicized. Conversations about radicalization are always very important to diverse political actors. That obviously very much affects the way you can implement projects and approaches. And I think this is one reality that people working in Central and Eastern Europe specifically have to deal with. Moving on, we've also emphasized the need to build a culture of exchange and dialogue. And that exchange and dialogue obviously should also focus on how online environments, mainstream media, affect all these topics, and they should be a top priority of the civil sector leaders and FLPs. Coming to the target group, this is something that I've mentioned also earlier. It is important to focus on those who are at risk of radicalization, not only those who are already radicalized. Two additional areas are important to focus, to emphasize here: disengagement and broadening, in the sense of including wider state and civic engagement to constructively address drivers. One point that has also been mentioned in the previous section is the need for a bottom-up, top-bottom approach. So the separation top-down is no longer relevant. And having this bottom-up, top-bottom approach can obviously bring a long-term and coordinated perspective in radicalization prevention. That is, address causes and provide future solutions. Those future solutions obviously should tackle and improved conditions on the ground. One important element in our project, and also in the same time a lesson, has been the need for collaboration. And how and why we consider collaboration to be an important factor is that it needs to address and prioritize actual issues and needs. That is what's important to participants, localize and work with the area approach rather than with a general approach. It's important to have a well-managed, coordinated implementation and to have access to good practices is key. Joint analysis, case response, integrated planning, and specifically joint training on these topics. It's important to mandate participation in these interventions, and while mandating participation, also provide good communication tools that are also reliable and of quality. Ownership, like rather local ownership of these interventions, is also essential for and was an essential element for champions, but also one of the lessons that we've drawn. And importantly, and I think I mentioned it earlier briefly, an integrated area-based approach. So focus on inclusion rather than securitization or policing. And this is tied in with the idea of creating a safe and open working atmosphere. Transfer of information, so learning of approaches, understanding problems and lessons. This should be obviously the key of multi-agency and multi-sectorial collaboration. Continuously engaging stakeholders, mapping and having a very coherent contacting process. And I think, as Javier mentioned earlier, the on-site, online combination has also been a very important lesson that we drew from the project. And in terms of policy, and I'm coming here to an end, I think some of our lessons have also had to do with the local element. Long-term funding as a continuation of the work is essential. It has been mentioned in the previous days in the need for co-funding for Central and Eastern Europe, and a dedicated scaling of impact mechanism to be accessed by successful initiatives. It's also important to have a local embedding of funding so that we can ensure that sustainability that is so desired. Create practices and processes that allow learning and evaluation. And this has also been one of the conversations that came across in the workshops, that learning system can actually support a community of practice, awareness raising activities, and obviously tailored and multi-layered approaches aiming at positive action. And I think this was from my side. Thank you very much for the conference. And we hope to continue working obviously together. Sylvia, I think I'll give you the floor again.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you for your presentation, also highlighting again the need to work with a regional approach or with a local approach, and also the need for long-term funding to raise also this issue. Thank you very much for that. We will move on with our next speaker, Nuria Millan Iniesta, the representative of NOVACT and the RAP project, Rising Against Polarization. Hi, Nuria.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Sylvia. Okay, do you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect. So good morning to all of you. I'm Nuria Millan, and I'm part of the human rights organization NOVACT, that is one of the coordinators of the RAP project, Rhizome Against Polarization. The Rhizome Against Polarization project aims to prevent all types of violent extremism, so far-right movements, jihadi Salafism groups, or even hate speech from a human rights and a community vision point of view. The project has 4 strategic lines. The first one is training and empowerment of first-line practitioners, increasing community resilience, especially with young people through alternative narratives, research and creation of public policy, and advocacy at national and also European level. And this project has been carried out in Spain through NOVACT, in Italy, through our friends from We World Djibouti, and in Austria through Sodwin organization. Still has awareness raising approach at European level. The project RAPS aims preventing all type of violent extremism and countering the addition to movements that spread hate, intolerance, and disseminate hate speech, racism, and xenophobic ideologies. We believe that the promotion of rights is equality, pluralism, and dialogue is the most effective instrument of prevention. We seek all the times in the project to empower all members of society, so they have a key role in prevention of violent extremism, and they have also tools to be able to confront hate speech. We think that creating a strong, resilient, and cohesive community is the best antidote to prevent violent extremism. And how we have done it? Basically, through education and training. We have created a manual and also various videos on how to prevent violent extremism, adapted to different groups and beneficiaries. And we have also added some good practices so the people can work in their daily life and in their jobs. For example, we have trained prison staff, civil society organizations, teachers, youth workers, psychologists, etc. And this has been one of our good practices that we have opted to include all type of actors in all the phases of the project: institutions, organizations, universities, educational centers, youth workers, so they can have an active role in preventing violent extremism. One of the most important parts of our project has been working with youth. These are one of the most vulnerable groups that are easy to adopt a hateful message. So many times working with data and news with adolescents is not effective. So we have opted to reach them through art, culture, and sport. For example, in Barcelona, we have worked on the rise of the extreme right movements through hip hop in a very unequal neighborhood in Barcelona, where Vox, the extreme right party in Spain, had risen a lot. Working through these methodologies have allowed us to make them understand how far right is working and also create alternative narratives to hate. This is also a good practice that we have used fresh message fan formats to connect with young people and try to adopt them and sensibilize them. In addition, we have also carried out the Rizoma training on far right that we have bring together young leaders from their communities in a participatory training, and we have also given them tools to prevent and combat extreme right jobs in their jobs and in their communities. They were young people with very different ideologies who came from different sectors from society, and for a month we have been learning about good practices, experiences, and we have gone deeper about how to prevent and combat far right. And finally, let us explain you that in order to make a good intervention in each territory, we have carried out a diagnosis about the state and the causes of violent extremism in each project, in each country. And we have done that through a participatory process with more than 100 actors per territory. This has allowed us to know from first hand how the local actors are working and what they think about what is the state of violent extremism in their local communities. This has also allowed us to make an action plan from a civil society point of view about how to prevent violent extremism. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope it was interesting, and I'm going to give the floor another time to Silvia.
Thank you so much, Nuria. Thank you for highlighting the need for dialogue formats to prevent extremism. Also, bringing up the topic of working with young people through sports and arts, because this is also a very dear topic to me, or very important topic for me. So I've really very much connected with that. Thank you so much. So I can see my colleague Javier already turned on his video. So I would like to introduce to you Javier Torregrosa, the representative of the University Polytechnica in Madrid and the representative of the Youngest Project. Javier, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Silvia. Please confirm me that you can see the presentation. We'll switch this.
We can see it.
Okay.
Yes, it's perfect now.
Thank you so much. First of all, hello everyone. My name is Javier. I would like to start thanking everyone who has taken part on this conference, all the organizers and the attendees. I'm part of the organization, as you might know, and it is quite important for us to have a response or the answer you have presented to us with your assistance here. So thank you, everyone, and let's start with this. As I told you, I'm Javier Torregrosa from Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, and I'm the representative of Youngest Project. The idea behind Youngest was to create an intervention, or to update the interventions or traditional interventions that are usually conducted in schools with some new technologies or an innovative approach. To do so, 4 partners joined. We from Universidad Politécnica, Oulun from Finland, Altum from Seville, and Militos from Greece. We all try to join 2 different perspectives here: the perspective of the educators and the kids in this case, and the perspective of data analysis. So, as I told you, here we joined different teams, a strange team. First of all, we have the educator and psychologist. I'm a psychologist. We also had software engineers and data analysts, NGOs. Altum is an NGO, in this case from Seville. And different organizations that show interest when we presented them the project. So different schools from Andalusia, different summer camps, and educators that double-checked the project while we were creating it to ensure its usefulness and its methodology. So the youngest approach, as I told you, is to design and create innovative materials to confront and prevent polarized ideas in young people. In this case, as I told you, we started from the idea that from more traditional intervention, school intervention, let's say people goes to the school and gives a talk or plays some games, some role-playing games. But we wanted to create an intervention which was first longer and two more interesting or more appealing for kids. So the idea was to implement serious games to support the explanations or the talks during the traditional interventions. We also pretend here, we also wanted to use not only self-reported information like questionnaires, but behavioral information. So one of the best implementations in the video game is that it is constantly extracting information, obviously anonymized, to detect if the kid is really learning through all the tests he is having through the game. So the polarized ideas here are obviously confronted using a preventive approach. And here we focus on the idea of psychological resilience, which was introduced in this case by Javier from Fundain to prevent that radicalization. So the idea here is we focus on the individual in the youngster in this case. So the psychological background, it won't take me too long. We have had projects of detection of radicalization. Here, instead of detection, we talk about resilience to prevent it. So we focus on the protective factors and also on improving that psychological skills that prevent someone to be engaged in this type of phenomenon. Let's say, for example, empathy, social skills, relaxation, etc. And we also aim to explain them about different cultures they don't know. You have to think that most of the one of the main risk factors of becoming radicalized is to be or to feel that you are being apart or separated or discriminated. So the idea here is to include more information about those cultures so they don't feel discriminated. So the project is divided in 11 sessions. We have emotional recognition. We work with emotional recognition. We work with relaxation techniques, physical relaxation, breathe, etc. Social skills, we give 2 different sessions about Islamic culture, and we finish it with conflict resolution skills. The idea is that each of these sessions is divided in 2 chapters of the game and 1 explanation. First, the kids start playing the game, which presents them with a situation, a problem. Then they stop playing, the teacher explains. It can be both from a video or in a face-to-face session. Explains the content or the psychological content behind the problem, and then they have to apply what they have learned in a second round of the game. So as you can see, the game is in Spanish, but they have to check. In this case, they are asking, how do you think Ahmed is feeling? And depending on the face represented, they have to decide which feeling what is he feeling. So going a step back, this project has 4 different steps, let's say. First is the creation of the whole intervention here with a communicated server who joins all the information extracted and then represents it again in a visualization tool. We have the classes, we have recorded everything. I don't know if Florian is here, but we talked yesterday on our works about this, about automatizing the interventions, and we have done it through different videos in this case, and of course the video game itself. So here's a small gameplay. I will present you. Here they have to interact with everyone, and they start with a conflict, and when they have to face that conflict, they have to, you see, as I told you, they have to decide how is he feeling. We check it in two different ways. First, they don't know nothing. They haven't been taught about emotion recognition, and then we ask again when they have been taught about this. So the main insights and lessons learned from the project, I have summarized everything in 5 points. So the first one is that any effective methodology shall include motivational elements. In this case, the idea of including a video game was quite relevant for the children. The teachers we asked to, they thought that it was a very interesting approach because it was a way to motivate them, motivate the kids to take part on the intervention. So also about the importance of asking both teachers and children, because of course we created a first game and we had to change it depending on the feedback we received. We found also a limitation due to the educators' background, because they are not taught with technological skills. Sometimes we find a big gap, for example, using Moodle platform or even another kind of platforms. So this should be improved, and we are working now on a small tutorial to work with this. Also, working with psychological resilience is quite relevant, and it gives basic skills to confront daily problems. The idea is that if you know how to, if you have a well-trained emotional intelligence, you will be less, you won't be a victim of this kind of events, or you will have low chances of being a victim of this kind of events, like let's say polarization in this case, or radicalization. Finally, we found a lot of problems related with the implementation. You know that we all suffered COVID, but we were especially dependent because we have to implement this in schools. So this is why Younger's project is still in work. We will finish it in, I think, December of this year, and we will present the outcomes in the future. We have already prepared 2 or 3 articles. If anyone is interested, they can send them. But also, as many other projects have said, you have on the YouTube channel the presentation of the project, let's say the video of the presentation, and I will also leave in the chat the link to the webpage in case anyone is interested. So I think this is all. Thank you very much. And Sylvia, it's your turn again.
Thank you so much, Javier. Thank you for presenting this new approach to us to combine prevention work with serious games, and also for presenting us little parts of your video game. Thank you so much. So I would now like to introduce to you Julia Rettich and Esther Karashsoni to present as representatives of the EFUS team to present the Bridge project to us.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. I will start talking, but my colleague Esther will share her screen. We are working for the European Forum for Urban Security, we are coordinating the project Bridge. And here we go, wonderful. The project is called Building Resilience to Reduce Polarization and Growing Extremism. We worked with 13 local and regional authorities, as well as a panel of experts to tackle polarization. I'll present you briefly the lessons learned from this project. The concept of polarization was very much uncharted territory for most of the municipalities. It was only with a few notable exceptions, cities do not yet monitor or assess polarization within their population yet. And we know that polarization can serve as a breeding ground for radicalization leading to violent extremism. Of course, when we talk about polarization, we mean pernicious polarization, polarization that harms social cohesion in our society. Addressing polarization at the local level is yet a very good idea, because municipalities are best placed to tackle polarization. They work closely with the local communities and population, and they have extensive competencies to develop prevention strategies to foster social cohesion and enhance community resilience. Addressing polarization is a sensitive topic, and it requires a whole of society approach and the collaboration of a variety of different stakeholders at the local level. These perceptions of local realities and tensions and polarized groups might vary significantly according to different stakeholders, and it is thus very, very important to elaborate a common understanding of the key terms and concepts with all actors involved, as well as the objectives of all the activities. We've learned that mitigating activities in case of sharpened tensions or conflicts on the ground should not be addressed to pushers of polarization. The activities should focus on target groups that do not actively take part in the sharpened conflict. Another important lesson is that municipalities and elected officials and police cannot act as bridge builders themselves. They should engage stakeholders at the local ground who do have access to those polarized groups or communities. Preventing polarization should complement the already existing prevention policies, and we know that many cities do have prevention programs and strategies. And they should build, of course, on existing knowledge, existing networks and resources that are aimed at fostering social cohesion. We've also learned that political support, engagement, and active communication by elected officials about the objectives and strategies to tackle polarization is very crucial. It is very crucial to have a whole of society approach. And having political support, political leadership for these activities that want to foster social cohesion provides these activities with the legitimacy and public acknowledgement, and that is very crucial. And I will give the floor to my colleague Esther, who will give you some insights on our recommendations for future projects in this field. Esther? We can't hear you yet.
We still can't hear you.
Okay, I will go on. Okay, I will go on. So I'm sorry, we have some technical issues. So our recommendations for future projects in the field of polarization would be, yes, we need to tackle this topic more. We need to learn more about polarization of societies, about the phenomena, and we need platforms and the exchange of good practices on how to mitigate polarization. We have learned, and we've seen within recent developments, if we think about the storm on the Capitol building in Washington this year in January, if we think about anti-COVID protests in Berlin last year, where people tried to breach parliament as well, that also a lot of adult people are being polarized. And we need more knowledge about how to address adult people, how to reach out to them, and what are best strategies and practices. We should, of course, when we talk about a very complex issue like polarization, rely and be inspired by an interdisciplinary approach. We need to include good practices like the restorative justice approach that has been developed in Northern Ireland, that brings polarized groups and together after conflicts. Of course, we need to rely on social psychology and all these insights, public health is a very crucial issue. Of course, political science, sociology, and all the practitioners on the ground, social workers who know their communities, who work closely with them. And I guess we have another slide, Esther. Yes, just a little outlook. We will publish a handbook for local authorities with recommendations from the project that might be interesting for you as well. It will be published in English and in French. And we have a final coordination meeting online the 31st of May, and you're all welcome to join. You'll find more information on our website. And last but not least, a very warm thank you for all our colleagues who have made this wonderful conference happen. It was very inspiring and insightful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia and Esther, for your input, for your presentation, so many insights of the Bridge project. Thank you so much. And also for highlighting that we need platforms and exchange of good practices to mitigate extremism, violent extremism. And this is also what we're trying to do, what the main aim and main goal of this conference is, so that we're coming together to exchange good practices, to exchange ideas, and so on as a community of experts. So I will now give the floor to Kai Brand Jacobson, the president of Patria and one of our partners in the Champions project, and also one of the main organizers of this conference. So Kai, the floor is yours to facilitate the discussion.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. Thank you to all of the presenters who've just shared with us from these 6 ISFP presentations or projects. Very, very rich presentations themselves, also bringing together work that has been carried out by each of these organizations and their partners over the last 2+ years. So a huge amount of work that has gone into it. I'd like to start by also saying thank you to all of the panelists and presenters who've taken part in EUPrevent 2021 over the last 4 days, from Monday through till today, and an extra thank you to everyone who has participated and contributed actively throughout the sessions, the practitioners forums, and all of the days of EUPrevent 2021. And before we dive into our interaction, discussions, and questions, I would also like to take a moment to thank our wonderful interpreters who've been with us on the first day, on a number of sessions, and who are helping us now, and to apologize for my much too fast presentation on day 1, which I think may have been a challenge as well. So thank you to our interpreters. Okay, here we are in the final event of EUPrevent 2021, but it is not an ending in any way. It is one event amongst the many that all of us in this field, as practitioners, as researchers, as people involved in these projects, are taking part in regularly. But we'd like to make this a special moment and a special step in the work we're doing together. As Sylvia has just said, EUPrevent 2021 is about creating a platform and creating spaces where we're coming together from across our projects and across the work we're doing, our different sectors, our different experiences in our different countries, to try to share lessons, identify and harvest what's working well, but also what are the challenges. What are practices that we know don't work or aren't enough anymore? And how can we improve on these? What are successes or work that we feel is being done well that we need to find ways of scaling? And as we were just hearing about sharing information, sharing knowledge, and how do we create the practices, the systems, the tools to be able to do that even more effectively going forward. We have now had presentations from the 6 ISFP projects, which have organized, and it was a huge team involved in working to prepare this, and especially Sylvia, Javier, Dana, and so many more who've worked over the last months. Now, we'd like to open the floor to everyone to be able to highlight lessons and reflections from throughout these 4 days. And we're also going to have an opportunity for anyone who wishes to ask questions about the presentations we've just had. Before we do that, I'd like to invite each of us on our own individually, wherever we are across Europe and internationally. I know friends are joining us from other countries as well, to take a moment and just on a piece of paper or a notepad beside you, or if you want on your computer, what would you write down as the 3 most interesting learnings or ideas that have come forward for you from throughout these 4 days? They could be from the presentations now. They could be from workshops you've taken part in EUPrevent 2021. It could be from your own experience. But I'd like to ask all of us as practitioners, as scholars, as colleagues in this field to do that exercise and try to reflect on and identify 3 lessons or innovations which you feel would be important for improving the work we do in this field. What would you like to see done more widely? What do we need to change? What do we need to improve? So just to invite each of us to take a moment to reflect on that. With that, I'd then like to open the floor to invite any who wish to share your questions or your comments. I'm not sure, Javier, on this platform, if people are able to also speak live directly, which would be wonderful, or if they can only write in the comments. I hope people will take benefit from both opportunities, but you can either write questions and comments in the chat or use the raise your hand function. We're going to use these last 40 minutes of EUPrevent 2021 to be able to hear from all of us and to hear your thoughts on practices and policies to improve our field going forward, as well as if you have questions to the speakers who have spoken and shared with us this morning. So with that, the floor is open. Please click on the raise hand function if you have any questions or if you'd like to share directly, and you can also write into the conversation in the chat space as well. Please, Carola.
Good morning, all. First of all, to my surprise, I really like this conference. My mind is buzzing and I'm very stimulated and happy with all the input. At the same time, I was wondering if a practitioner would be as excited as I am, because it might have been a bit too much. And this is also one of the thoughts that has been repeated, how to be more accessible to practitioners, how to get all the beautiful tools we have created to our practitioners. And in my opinion, collecting a new pool of tools is not the only solution. So I was thinking, I was going to ask you what your thoughts are about saying that the next project should be on trying to find ways to implement and structurally embed tools, both resilience tools and CV, PV tools, and then focus on how should we make sure they are properly and structurally embedded somewhere. And the next project should focus on that. So not on the content per se, but on the ways to consolidate and sustain our tools. That's my question.
Thank you so much for that question. So this is important for so many of our projects, our EC supported projects and others. We're developing tools. There are lots of tools and materials. How do we then get those out to the people who actually need to use them, or to those who can benefit from them in a way that's useful for them? I'd like to open that up to any of our partners from the 6 ISFP projects. If anyone has any thoughts or reflections you'd like to share on that. How do we get our tools out to practitioners in a way that can be useful and used by them? Is there anyone from any of the 6 ISFP projects who'd like to take a go at that?
Bettina, I think you have a raised hand. Please go.
Thank you. I'm Bettina Uhrig, and I'm the impact manager in a Horizon 2020 project. It's called DARE, Dialogue About Radicalization and Equality. And it was really very, very interesting for me to, I couldn't participate in all sessions, but to participate in many of the sessions. And I think the colleague who just spoke now, what she said, I really have the same concerns. So how do we really maintain a cooperation, and how do we make all the findings, tools, handbooks easily available for our practitioners and stakeholders, and even in different languages? For example, in DARE, we are 17 partners from 13 different countries, and we have in 12 countries, we have national stakeholder groups. And the issue is always, can we have all the findings in the national languages? So, and I also was wondering what the European Commission is actually doing for helping us to bring all these fantastic experiences and results together and not losing the findings. So, I mean, of course, your projects are funded by DG Home. Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe is funded by DG Research and Innovation. I have been at a seminar where we discussed together our findings, but I'm not sure. I mean, we talked about RAN, of course, and also on the first day, there was a colleague from DG Home talking about it, but it's still very unclear for me how they will bring together all the different projects and how we can have the findings available in the future. Sorry, that was so.
Bettina, thank you so much. An incredibly important question, also building on that from Carola before. We're going to open up and invite for anyone who has ideas and recommendations. We have such an incredibly experienced group of colleagues with us. I would also say that it's not only for us to look to the European Commission for how they will do it, but also for us together with broad communities of practitioners to bring our proposals and ideas forward to them. We have a number of hands that have gone up. Rasha Nagem, please.
Good morning, I'm Rasha Nagem, a European project manager, and I am from Way Out too, with my colleague Shafia. And we have worked on many European project practices at 2020, Way Out, Integra, and so on. And during this project, we created pedagogical tools and tools for young and youth resilience and education. And we tried, first of all, to disseminate these tools. We had a network of practitioners. So we disseminated the tools. We have them on our internet with the booklet, so they can use it, such as a serious game or Agora City, kind of tool that we created through practices and other projects for young resilience through democracy. And I believe it's very important, the fact to disseminate it, to reach practitioners, because they are not aware of what we are doing. It's not really only the work of the European Commission, it's the work of us as partners, as researchers, as practitioners. We are now a group, we are not only researchers on the projects or practitioners or academics. We are all of our network is very important, and sharing these tools and contacting the local authorities, for instance, schools, or we did this, and we even did more. It's about, we suggested that the partner who created these tools, they contacted the different local authorities and cities in Europe, and they proposed to give some workshop on the use of these tools and how to use them with young people or with youth. So it's very important, first of all, to disseminate the tools, because having them on as outputs on the internet, on our websites for the different, it's very good, but it's not enough. We have to work for it. There should be an action, and this action should be included in our the plan of the project. It's not about only creating a tool and saying, I did this. It's about how I'm going to disseminate the tools. I'm going to reach people, and having this volonté, this will to go to see. I proposed it, for instance, for my child's schools, telling them we have this tool in intro on the. Why don't you can use it? It's free. It's done for you. It's done for the citizens. It's done for practitioners, for school. So use it. So I think this kind of personal dissemination as our conscious as researcher or academic or practitioners, and there's this formal with the CE, with website and so on. I think this is disseminating and reaching networks. And networks, for instance, we had partners such as EFUS, and it was very, very important because through EFUS we reached a lot of cities and local authorities, and we reached in a way not a very big amount of practitioners, but we did it. So this is the way I believe we can use it for disseminating our tools and reaching the practitioners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rasha. Thank you. We have a number of hands that have gone up. I have Godwin Okoko and Javier Ruperez, and then also Florian Huber from CINIO, and a number of the projects discussed here also would like to share some experiences on how they have done this in the context in Austria. Godwin, I'd like to hand the microphone to you. Also, just to remind all participants and speakers, if we can try and formulate our inputs concisely so that we make sure to give space for everyone. We really want to hear from you, but to hear from as many of us as possible as we take this conversation forward. Godwin, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Kai, and hello to everyone on this platform. I'm speaking from Plateau State, North Central Nigeria. I've been following all the presentation the last few days and quite educating, learning greatly for me, especially in terms of strong experiences of best practice in transforming extremism. Just trying to ask, how can this work in terms of our local context here in Africa, especially the sub-Sahara region, in terms of the Sahel region here over in Nigeria? Looking at also the situation, I loved what the first presenter talked about just not focusing also about the perpetrators of terrorist activities, but also the victims as well. And of course, I have seen most of the projects being done, especially in Northeast Nigeria, that have been ravaged by activities of Boko Haram, are more focused around also forming and also creating a space for healing for victims of the attack, but also that little or much is not done around also the perpetrators of this. What do we do? And currently in the North Central Nigeria, where I come from, we are beginning to have increasing involvement of young youths in the issues of community gangsterism and cultism, and of course conflict afford across lines of religion, ethnicity, and so I wanted to see, can anyone share with us some best practice, and also can we say that we can come up with something around a tool for, rather than preventing and countering violence extremism, can we have a tool around preventing and transforming violent extremism, like also we have around conflict transformation? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Godwin. I'm actually going to take your question very briefly myself. I'd invite others as well, but I've worked quite a good deal across Northeast Nigeria, primarily in Adamawa and Borno State. There are efforts being done there by local, national, as well as international organizations, internationally ones like Search for Common Ground in particular, who are creating platforms to bring practitioners together, looking at developing local peace committees and also supporting, for example, in Adamawa, the creation of a state-level peace agency that is also then working with local level peace committees to enable communities and civic organizations as well as state agencies to come together and looking at how to address issues such as reconciliation and healing and support for survivors. I know the topic of reconciliation incredibly contentious and challenging in the context, but also looking at how do you deal with the needs of survivors? How do you deal with the needs of youth combatants and former combatants, and to address the impacts that the violence has had on society more widely. Godwin, I'm going to put in my email in the chat if you'd like to be in touch together on this further, please do. It's an area that we can help to connect with many organizations. I'd like to turn over the microphone to Javier, and then Florian, if you wish to also speak to all of us on the experiences you mentioned, to share them, that would be wonderful as well. Please, Javier.
Well, from my side, coming back on these questions on how to reach practitioners and which could be the efforts of the EU in this line, and taking some of the reflections and make in most of the presentation of the lessons learned from the project, but also some things that Carola mentioned, plus an additional information that nowadays the European Commission is working in the launching, which is already started of the, let's say, the so-called RAN 2, which tries to make extensive the work of the RAN to practitioners, but this will be focused in working with countries. So if this effort in the next years is encompassed with this kind of recommendation of developing national networks and the things that Carola mentioned of additional efforts in developing these kind of methodologies, let's say, to further develop contextualized action, take the most efficient things and develop contextualized intervention. This can be a good approach. So in this sense, we should, let's say, put the eye not only in the European Commission, but also in the national governments to take this opportunity to now work in RAN 2 and to deploy all these in their countries in a cascade effect. And to this point that Carola also mentioned, to develop kind of methodologies and compilation of resources and transfer methods, tools like Florian can next later talk more about, but tools like firstlinepractitioners.com, which somehow part of this, because it's a really important resource nowadays that has been developed under a number of different European projects. It's a perfect point where all these can converge and serve to reach practitioners in the very specific local level communities and so on. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Javier, for sharing those answers, and for all of us now working together to try and answer that question. How can we improve sharing and utilization of outcomes and results? We have Florian Huber from CINEO with us, and then Eric Poinceau, both who are going to share some of their own answers. I would also like to again then ask and invite all of us step back and to reflect more broadly. This question of how do we improve scaling and using results, such an important one for our work. Are there other questions we should be discussing as well? We have 25 minutes remaining in EUPrevent 2021. I'd also invite us to reflect and invite all of us taking part today. Are there other items and questions you would like to raise as well? Again, once you speak, or if you'd like to speak, please do raise your hand. That's the easiest way for us to see that. You have that button on the lower command model of the Zoom. And once you have spoken, if you can lower the hand just so we can see who's still waiting, that would be wonderful. So Florian, I turn the mic to you, and then Eric after.
Just let's say thanks, Javier, also for the reminder again what was mentioned on the first with this new revised RAN approach. I think RAN, Radicalization Awareness Network. So I think this will be one interesting way. We'll see what happens. Also, what you mentioned with the First Line Practitioners platform, this is something we from CINEO, as we are the host of it, we will try to and will definitely continue with working with it in future projects. So this is, I would say, one approach, which on the other hand, I think it's sort of a meta approach, but for reaching really the local practitioners, I think this needs to be also the other, let's say, the bottom-up approach, which works, I think, in several, at least the ones that we are involved in the ISFP projects, where we have the local practitioner organization also involved as part of the consortium with funding as well. I think that's a highly important point in this context. But what we also see from the Austrian context, we're currently working on a KIRAS, it's a national security funding program from Austria, KIRAS project, which is called Resilience Works. And here the approach was also a very strong bottom-up approach, where which is dealing with labor market integration of young people that do have, let's say, come from a very vulnerable or marginalized background. And in this context, the needs were articulated from the trainers that are working with these young people to look into it. And this was actually then the approach now in this project is we're working with these trainers that are working with the young people and try to, let's say, identify or clarify their needs on a very local level. And of course, then from the other side, we as the coordinators and working on this project, we're looking then, of course, on the best practices, on tools, and also probably games that have been developed on the European project level and try to see, okay, what makes sense for this particular context. So of course, this is, let's say, the other way around. And there, these, let's say, collective, like also radicalization awareness network and also the first line practitioners and all the outcomes from the project, to have them under one roof, also collected, where we, working now from the very bottom-up approach, can look for what makes sense in this context that is sort of labor market integration related tools in this resilience context. There we are looking for these practices and tools now that have already been developed. So this is how they could also be taken up, not only from top down with more money for future promotion or whatever, but to try to really engage through the very local and probably also national funding opportunities let's say also do have a strong focus on this level. I can post a link here for those who read German or use Google Translate. You can have a look in detail on this particular project. But there we will definitely take up your or our tools and knowledge that has been created in such project like that are represented here.
Thank you so much, Florian, for those experiences and for sharing the resilience work site, which you can click on from the chat. Florian's just added that there for us. And handing over now to Eric to share with us an interesting experience and model from France.
Yeah, as I mentioned in the chat, something that works quite well in France is the network of resource centers on urban development. The reason I'm mentioning that is that, in my opinion, if you want to identify and disseminate good practices and resources on radicalization, you have the technical tools to make it available. We have a RAN website, however imperfect it is. We have a frontline practitioners website. So the problem is not to make it available, it's to actually present it to local actors at local level. And in my opinion, this resource center play an interesting role because it's the right level. They exist at regional level. So we have about 10 to 15 of them for the whole of France. So, you know, we need an intermediate level. It can't be just, you know, a European network on the one side and local actors on the other side. There's too much of a difference between the two. We need some kind of some sort of brokers to actually bring interesting tools and best practices to the ground and mobilize a network of local actors at regional level. These networks, resource centers on urban development, they don't just work on urban development in a limited sense. They also work on discrimination, they also work on social integration, and some of them do make prevention of radicalization part of their portfolio, not all of them. But it's the kind of structure, I mean, that could be interesting in order to make resources on PCV available to local actors and to mobilize a very wide range of public and private actors at local level. So they could not only, it's not only about having a network no, it's not only about making resources available, it's also about supporting local projects. It's about identifying interesting resources, good practices, and actually, to say that, incorporating PCV into the work that local actors already do at local level. And in order to do that, as I said, you really need, in my opinion, an intermediate level between a European-wide network of professionals and the job that local actors do on a very basis, even in small municipalities, neighborhoods, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much, Eric. I would also like to actually just input some thoughts here. This is a very an area that we work quite a bit on. And one of the ideas I would like to highlight for all of us, since many of us are working on project-based approaches in much of the work we do, is the distinction between an intervention-based approach to change and a systemic or integrated approach. And what I mean, just to illustrate that briefly, say, for example, in our European Commission supported projects or in a local or national project, we're doing work with youth or work on developing education tools. Maybe within the span of our project, which might last over 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, we build in doing a number of workshops with youth or in schools or with teachers. In an intervention-based approach, that work happens as long as our project continues, as long as we have funding for it. So we've developed great new tools that can help reach youth. And in our project, we do training of 200 youth, 2,000 youth, or even 20,000 youth. And that's been built into and budgeted in our project. We have people who are paid for it, they have the time for it, and it's our activities and tasks. But it happens only as long as the project is there. And when the project is over, people may not know about those tools after. A different model is a systems approach or integrated approach. This is where your focus in your theory of change and project logic and the activities that you do in your project isn't only for you to implement the activities with youth, but instead you do a systems mapping. You look at how are youth reached within your community or your country, for example, through the school system or through youth organizations. And instead of designing activities where you're just implementing it through your project or your partners and others across Europe, you're working so that the curricula is entered into the national education program or into special sessions so that pedagogical schools and teacher training colleges train all teachers in this so that the ministry mandates it. Now, it's not really about either or, because many of us work with ministries of education and with these systems in our projects, but there are very few organizations and practitioners in Europe that are actually trained in how to do a systems approach and how to really achieve impact at this level. And maybe one of the things we could do in future EUPrevent sessions or in our projects is to try to harvest lessons and examples of how do we get results to be taken up from project results to actually mainstreaming them and integrating them. Another aspect that has been mentioned is the work at national and local levels. In the same way that we're having an event like this, an EUPrevent forum, in a few months, there's going to be exactly the same type of conference, but only happening at a national level in Romania, where every single EC supported project, but also other initiatives domestically in the country addressing hate, extremism, radicalization, fake news, they're all going to come together and over a series of workshops over a number of days be sharing experiences. And this was mentioned yesterday, the example from Northern Ireland, where every year they used to have the Peace Week, bringing together everyone in the field. There are a lot of tools we can look at. Another approach is, instead of within our projects, having a few people from law enforcement or teachers, and then are developing tools like a lot of European Commission projects have done, to take a more user and design-based approach and start by asking users what they need, not ourselves coming with our ideas of what's needed. and then from that, involving them at every step of the way in prototyping and developing tools that actually meet their needs. And quite a few European projects are using this approach and this model now, such as the Participation Project, which has just begun. We have a number of questions and input that have been shared. I would like to ask Franziska Dornig, you have raised a very important and interesting question. Would you like to share that with us if you want to speak it out?
Hello, Kai. Well, actually, my question has already been answered by Julia. My question was rather really operational, because yesterday I had a quite eye-opening moment in a talk about the zero-sum mindset. And I just requested the name of the speaker, which was given to me by Julia. So thank you again in that form, and a general thank you for that first platform to get together. But as a practitioner and also an academic, but more on a practitioner side, I work for the federal program Live Democracy. I really feel a little overwhelmed by all the projects existing in Europe now. And I really wish for some guideline or some platform to have a more of an easy going engagement and getting information. So I do not know whether I'm alone, but I feel that I do on a local basis see a potential to interact on a European level. However, at the end, it's overwhelming, and I do not know whether here we can have a link between the international programs, the academia, and then of course the local area. So I'm quite interested to see how it will go on. And I hope that the digitalization will give us a push in more of an easy way to connect and exchange ideas.
Can I invite anyone from amongst our entire community, participants, presenters, partners, and projects? Would anyone like to build upon or address this challenging issue that Franziska has raised? So many projects, so many initiatives, so much happening at many different levels. How can we make that more accessible and intelligible? How can we find the right ways to consolidate and get material and information together in a way that people can find what they need? Okay, no one jumping up to address it specifically. I think actually quite a few of the inputs in response to the conversation that has been developing now actually do address that. Franziska, you at the end mentioned digitalization and how that can help. I'd like to share one of the platforms that has been presented this week that is on firstlinepractitioners.com. Dana Dolgin mentioned it when sharing from the Champions Project. This is the Alert Arena Training Yard tool that has been created to actually be used across Europe. So it allows localization where you can set up the platform for different cities, and first-line practitioners, which can include psychologists, social workers, tram drivers, teachers, law enforcement actors, anyone from different relevant groups in the community can flag if there's an alert, either a developing incident, something that has happened, or long-term issues. This then goes to an arena where there are practitioners and experts working on these issues and organizations from within the community who will receive that notice and can discuss and see how to engage in it together or organize in-person roundtables and multi-stakeholder meetings. And there's also a training yard, which is an attempt to bring together useful knowledge and materials, multilingual, to make it easier access. What's interesting is the First Line Practitioners platform has really brought together from several different projects a number of great materials and resources. Maybe we can look at further evolutions, how we integrate all of those to make them even more accessible for people. That's part of the ongoing work that the team at First Line Practitioners is doing, but it really does help to bring it together. In another project, one thing that is happening here in Romania, for example, around gender-based violence, is we're getting all of the different state agencies and ministries that work on this and all the different civic organizations, and we're developing projects together to create a platform and an app where every single toolkit, handbook, research that exists in that field is consolidated together and easy to access. Because at the moment, the main tool we have for finding these is Google search. And then it is overwhelming for too many. I would like to ask any other hands that want to come up, any inspiration or ideas from these days that you'd like to share, last reflections, with 8 minutes with us still remaining for EUPrevent 2021. So I just want to give that space and open the floor in case people have other highlights or reflections you'd like to share from this conference. Please, and I will apologize, but is it Jornada Deus Pereira? You can help us with the pronunciation, please. I think you're still on mute. Jornada, you're on mute. If we could invite you, if you turn off the mute.
Okay, I am. Sorry. So, well, first, thank you for this amazing 3 days. As a researcher and not a practitioner, I think one interesting input would bring closer research and policy interface and build bridges with practitioners. I think research is still very inside a bubble, namely in some academic domains. And I think it would be very interesting to break some silos amidst other disciplines. I see here David Camacho. We met 2 years ago here in Brussels. I was doing international relations and studying radicalism and extremism and far right, and he was IT, IA, and we did found a common ground. So I think also to prevent better, to understand better the phenomena of extremism and radicalization, we need to understand better the root causes and to bring disciplines together. I had also very interesting conversations with Carola and Orla, and for example, from what I understood, without being very profound, is that, for example, psychology, international relations, radicalization, hi David, and IT, artificial intelligence, need absolutely to be brought together, to dialogue more and to understand more about each other's disciplines. So thank you so much for this wonderful days and exchange of ideas. It was amazing. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you as well. Thank you. Anyone else wish to share briefly any final thoughts or feedback as we come to the completion of EUPrevent 2021? Eric, I see your hand up there again, please.
Yeah, thank you. The issue of a gap between research and practice has been addressed several times during the conference. And I think that if you want to fill that gap between research and practice, which is absolutely crucial, the first thing you need is long-term commitment. One-off events or efforts don't work. Because, well, I have some past in research, and now I'm a practitioner, so you can say that I have a foot in both worlds, and I can see that people come from very different perspectives, and sometimes they simply don't understand each other, because when you are in practice, you don't understand the mere logic of research, and vice versa. So if you just organize a one-off event, one-off a short-term effort, that won't be enough, because you won't get past this. You won't be able to say that to get past that difficulty of just speaking the same language and understanding the logic of your other party. So you really need to have a long-term perspective on that and have a continuity in dialogue between these two parties.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Eric. And this brings us now to the completion of EUPrevent 2021 and looking also at the way forward. I'm just going to, a few seconds, highlight and pepper some ideas that have come up from the discussions throughout the last 4 days. We had it raised the challenge which is presented by the lack of clear definitions of extremism, violent radicalization, terrorism, and different legal frameworks across the EU as well, and the need that so many have spoken of to deepen understanding. We have had more than a decade of EU-supported research projects and much more work done on developing and fostering that understanding. So then the question might be, how do we draw upon all that work? Not every project repeating, having an early work package that looks at what every other project has done, because we keep doing that and keep spending money on it, but how do we begin to really bring these results together and improve our shared understanding and getting that out to the broader community? The need to also focus on root causes. A lot of work is often response-based, dealing with manifestations, dealing with incidents, but how do we deepen this mapping and understanding of the ecosystems and the root causes, contexts, and drivers that are fueling and enabling violent radicalization and extremism, the underlying social, political, economic problems and issues that actually give rise to them, and then move upstream in working to address those, as well as longer term focus. How do we have a constructive program and work to build those better democracies and inclusive societies, including those who have critical viewpoints different than ours? The challenge that came up in a number of workshops of this climate of hate and demonization, and sometimes ridiculing those who might hold different views, as Roger shared in the special session yesterday and in many working sessions people mentioned. How do we create greater spaces of dialogue and engagement across different views, as also Georgi Tatar from the Budapest Center for Mass Atrocities Prevention raised? Technological approaches. We had a very interesting session looking at different innovations. We've also discussed the challenge and risk that is raised by this increasing penetration of fake news, the power of unaccountable social media companies, and the need for us as societies to really address how we engage with this. The challenge now during the COVID period, where we're seeing this increased creation of doubt, creation of distrust, creation of misinformation, and a number of workshops raise the issue of how will that have repercussions in years to come, not only in the short term now, but also even post-COVID as well. So much discussion around the experiences of projects working with youth, both those focusing on youth who are radicalized, on the pathways to radicalization, also sharing different online gaming tools, serious gaming, boot camps that can be done, approaches to empowering youth. But that reality, youth are not a homogenous group. They're not one single space or society across Europe. And quite often we face the domestic political challenges and the European political challenge that many of our youth do not feel involved or have the space to be involved. This is also true of other generations. A lot of sessions focused on how we can improve sharing our experiences, and the question of evaluation came up, particularly in the Getting Better at Getting Better session. How do we improve the use of evaluation and harvesting the incredible amount of knowledge and experience gained in work and projects all across the European Union and by frontline practitioners on a daily basis, and the need to learn from other fields? This isn't something new. In medicine, operations are carried out all across the world every single day, and they have developed an elaborate and rich approach to try to harvest learning and lessons. Can we learn from the field of medicine? Can we learn from law enforcement, peace building, human rights, and other sectors to see how we can create learning systems? A number of sessions on city-based approaches and the need to improve practical collaboration on the ground, localizing and enabling different sectors and actors, psychologists, law enforcement, urban planners, teachers, civil society, policymakers, to come together, improve mutual understanding, joined up training, joint planning, joint evaluations. A lot of work, powerful input from today and also in previous sessions on gender, the need to dramatically increase the participation and representation of all genders in all decision-making and practice spaces, the need to recognize the different ways in which women are being engaged and roles they're playing in radical movements, the ways in which increasingly extremist movements are targeting women's rights, and also LGBTQI communities as one of their hate targets, and the need to more robustly engage with the socialization of men, issues of toxic masculinities, but also how do we bring forward healthy masculinities? And then, as Chuck Bartels, you raised in your comment here as well, the fundamental importance and the issue before all of us with regards to democracy. How do we reinvigorate and create our future pathways in Europe to make more authentic democracies and create well-being for as widely as we can within our societies? So much more. I'm sorry that I haven't even been able to touch upon the real breadth of the richness of sharing and learning that has happened over these 4 days. Many have asked to receive copies of the presentations. The presentations are now being collected from all of the different speakers across different workshops. We will collect these and make them available, sharing them both from email, from the EUPrevent Secretariat. Also, we'll see if we can get these up in some form or another on firstlinepractitioners.com. We've heard about a lot of tools from different projects. We'll try and collect these together, make them available for you as well. And also, short videos have been created. Some were already shared in chat. We're going to collect these and make them available too. At the end of the day, this is a field in development. I know a number of colleagues here with us have been working in these areas over years and decades, others joining more recently, but this is not an area where we look to the commission or to one institution or to one platform. We are all part of a community of practice, an area and a field of practice, and all of us can take on board ideas and issues that we have heard and discussed together through these days, and through our own work, see how to improve and to take it forward. And now the European Commission has launched a new line, a new call for funding for projects in these areas. And how can we, as we develop our forward projects, work to integrate and practice ourselves some of what we've been discussing and recommending these days? I would like to, at the end, say thank you to everyone who's worked over the last months from all of the different projects to make this event possible. Thank you for all who have joined and taken part through EUPrevent 2021. I want to throw out now the idea that we make this an annual event, that more of us get involved in organizing it together, and that we hold it at national and city levels as well. And thank you to the amazing interpreters and translators who've helped us throughout these days, the whole team at Global Lingo and their colleagues. Mulțumesc, köszönöm, dankeschön, spasiba, gracias, hvala. Thank you to all, and wishing us good work in all we do going forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.
Thank you, bye-bye.
You.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.